Barack Obama, known worldwide as the former president of the United States, rarely went unnoticed in public. Yet, on a quiet afternoon during a casual visit to a small town, he entered a bustling cafe, seeking nothing more than a cup of coffee and a moment of peace. The cheerful chime of the doorbell was met with silence as the staff glanced up, their eyes widening at the sight of the unexpected guest. A few murmurs rippled through the patrons, but as Obama approached the counter, the warmth in the room seemed to dissipate. "I'm sorry, sir," the barista said curtly, her voice flat. "We're too busy to take more orders right now." Obama's brow furrowed, his gaze flicking to the half-empty tables and the casual pace of the staff. Before he could respond, another customer entered and was promptly greeted with a smile and a menu. Something wasn't right. Barack Obama was known for his poise and his ability to navigate even the most tense situations. On this particular afternoon, he had been traveling through a small town during a speaking tour and decided to take a break from the hustle. The cafe he spotted on the corner of Main Street seemed inviting, rustic decor, a cozy patio, and the rich aroma of coffee wafting through the air. As he stepped inside, the familiar chime of the doorbell rang out. Conversations paused, and all eyes turned to him. He was no stranger to the attention his presence often drew, so he offered his usual warm smile and a polite nod before approaching the counter. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice friendly. "I'll have a black coffee, please." The barista, a young woman with a name tag that read Emily, glanced at him, her expression unreadable. She hesitated before responding. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're not taking more orders right now. We're overwhelmed." Obama looked around. Several tables were empty, and while the cafe was busy, it wasn't chaotic. "I understand," he said calmly, "but it seems manageable. I don't mind waiting if that helps." Emily's lips tightened. "We can't serve you right now," she repeated, her tone more clipped. Barack Obama stepped aside, his calm exterior betraying only a hint of puzzlement. He wasn't someone who leapt to conclusions, but the interaction at the counter left a lingering question. Why had he been told the cafe was too busy when it clearly wasn't? He found a spot near the window where he could observe without interrupting the flow of the cafe. From his vantage point, he saw the staff move efficiently, clearing tables, taking orders, chatting amiably with customers. The air of hospitality seemed directed at everyone except him. Minutes later, the doorbell chimed as another customer entered. A young couple walked to the counter, and a different barista greeted them with a bright smile. "Welcome. What can I get you today?" she asked cheerfully. Obama watched as their order was taken without hesitation, the contrast to his own experience striking. He glanced at the half-empty tables around him, noting how the atmosphere felt warm and inviting for others, but oddly closed off to him. As Obama continued to watch, he noticed the subtle shifts in body language among the staff. Whenever they glanced his way, there was a stiffness to their movements, a quickness in averting their gaze. It was as if his presence made them uncomfortable. At one point, Emily, the barista who had refused him service, whispered something to a coworker. The coworker's eyes flicked toward Obama briefly before she nodded and walked away. Obama's thoughts raced. Was he overthinking this? Could it simply be a misunderstanding? He decided to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least for now. After waiting for several minutes, Obama approached the counter again. This time, he addressed a different barista, a young man who was restocking pastries. "Excuse me," Obama said, his tone as polite as ever. "I noticed the cafe seems less busy now. Would it be possible to place an order?" The young man froze for a moment, glancing toward Emily as if seeking her approval. Emily, who had been watching from a distance, quickly stepped in. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her tone brisk. "We're still too busy to take additional orders." Obama raised an eyebrow. "I see," he said. "It's just that I noticed others being served after I arrived." Emily's face flushed slightly, but she maintained her composure. "We prioritize customers who are dining in," she said. Obama gestured toward the empty tables. "I'd be happy to take a seat if that helps," he replied, his voice calm but firm. Emily hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll check with the manager," she said before walking away. By now, other patrons had begun to take notice. The quiet murmur of conversations faded as eyes turned toward Obama and the counter. A few customers exchanged curious glances, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. "Is that Obama?" one woman whispered to her companion. "It is," her friend replied. "Why aren't they serving him?" Rachel, the young woman seated near the window, had been watching the entire interaction. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She glanced at her phone, debating whether to record the situation, but something about Obama's calm demeanor made her pause. Instead, she decided to approach him. Gathering her courage, she walked over to where he was standing. "Excuse me, sir," Rachel said softly. "I couldn't help but notice what's been happening. Are they refusing to serve you?" Obama turned to her, his expression kind but measured. "It seems that way," he said simply. Rachel's brow furrowed. "That's not right. I've been here for a while, and I've seen them serve plenty of people who came in after you." Obama nodded. "I've noticed the same thing," he replied. Rachel hesitated, then added, "I think you should speak to the manager. This doesn't seem like an honest mistake." Obama considered her suggestion. He wasn't one to create unnecessary conflict, but he also believed in addressing issues head-on. "You might be right," he said. "Thank you for your perspective." As if on cue, the manager emerged from the back, his expression neutral but slightly tense. He approached Emily, who quickly whispered something to him while casting a glance toward Obama. The manager's gaze followed hers, and for a brief moment, his composure faltered. He adjusted his tie before walking over to Obama. "Good afternoon," the manager said, his tone professional but guarded. "I understand there's been some confusion." Obama extended his hand in greeting. "Good afternoon. I'd like to clarify something, if I may." The manager nodded. "Of course." Obama gestured toward the counter. "I was told the cafe is too busy to take more orders, but I've noticed several customers being served since then. I just want to understand if there's been a miscommunication." The manager hesitated, his eyes darting toward Emily. "I'll look into it," he said quickly. "In the meantime, we'd be happy to take your order now." The tension in the room was almost palpable as Obama placed his order. The other patrons, who had been silently observing, began to murmur among themselves. Some nodded in approval of how calmly Obama had handled the situation, while others whispered about the staff's behavior. Rachel, still seated by the window, couldn't help but smile. "He handled that like a pro," she thought to herself. As Obama returned to his seat with his coffee, the room seemed to exhale collectively. But the incident was far from forgotten. It had planted a seed of awareness in everyone who witnessed it. Barack Obama sat quietly at his table, the warm afternoon sunlight streaming through the cafe's large windows. He sipped water from a complimentary glass left on the table, but the lack of service weighed on him. The cafe wasn't chaotic, and the staff appeared capable of managing the flow of customers, yet he remained unserved. The whispers from other patrons grew louder, their curiosity mounting. Rachel, the young woman who had already spoken to Obama, glanced around the room. She could sense the discomfort spreading among the patrons. "This isn't right," she muttered under her breath. Meanwhile, the manager approached Emily at the counter. The two exchanged hurried whispers, casting glances in Obama's direction. Emily gestured defensively, while the manager frowned, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. Obama observed the exchange with quiet interest. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but his experience had taught him to recognize moments when bias, conscious or unconscious, played a role. After a few minutes, the manager stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. He approached Obama's table with measured steps, clearly aware that the room's attention was on him. "Good afternoon, sir," the manager began, his tone professional but guarded. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding." Obama looked up, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Good afternoon." I was hoping to clarify something. When I arrived earlier, I was told the cafe was too busy to take more orders. Since then, I've seen several customers arrive and receive service. I'd like to understand if there's been a change in capacity. The manager hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Obama's directness. We, sometimes prioritize customers who are dining in, he said, stumbling over his words. Obama gestured toward the half-empty tables around him. I'd be happy to take a seat if that's the requirement, he replied. But that doesn't seem to be the case for everyone. As the exchange unfolded, other patrons started chiming in. A middle-aged woman seated nearby raised her voice. I've been here for almost an hour, and they've served plenty of people without any issue. A man sitting at a corner table added, yeah, what's the holdup? This doesn't seem fair. Rachel stood up from her seat, her phone still in her hand. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said firmly. It's deliberate. I've been watching since he walked in, and it's clear they're treating him differently. The manager glanced around nervously, the mounting criticism clearly unsettling him. I assure you, that's not the case, he said, his voice strained. Then why is he still waiting? Rachel pressed. Obama raised a hand gently, signaling for calm. I appreciate everyone's concern, he said, addressing the room. But let's give the staff an opportunity to make things right. The room quieted as Obama's steady voice filled the space. His ability to diffuse tension was undeniable, and even those who were upset felt compelled to listen. Turning back to the manager, Obama continued, all I'm asking for is fairness. If there's a specific policy I've overlooked, I'm happy to comply. But if there isn't, I'd like to place my order. The manager seemed to wilt under the weight of Obama's words. He nodded quickly. Of course, sir. I'll personally ensure you're served right away. As the manager walked back to the counter, the room seemed to relax. Rachel returned to her seat, but she kept her phone in hand, ready to record if the situation escalated again. When the barista finally brought Obama his coffee, her hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup on the table. I apologize for the delay, sir, she said quietly. Obama offered her a kind smile. Thank you, he said simply, his tone devoid of malice. Rachel leaned over to her companion, whispering, he handled that better than I would have. No yelling, no drama, just calm and clear. Her companion nodded. That's leadership for you. He made his point without turning it into a spectacle. The other patrons returned to their conversations, but the atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. The incident had left an impression on everyone who witnessed it, a subtle reminder of how bias, intentional or not, could influence even the smallest interactions. As Obama took his first sip of coffee, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. It wasn't about the coffee, it never had been. It was about the principle of fairness and the power of addressing a situation with dignity and grace. He glanced out the window at the bustling street outside, a small smile playing on his lips. There was still work to be done in the world, but moments like these reminded him that progress often began with simple acts of accountability. Barack Obama sat quietly at his table, sipping his complimentary water as the atmosphere in the cafe grew increasingly tense. Patrons whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances in his direction. Rachel, the young woman who had spoken to him earlier, remained at her seat, but her phone rested on the table, ready to record if necessary. The manager, visibly uneasy, approached Obama once again. His steps were deliberate, but the tension in his expression betrayed his discomfort. Mr. Obama, he began, his voice wavering slightly. I want to personally apologize for the earlier confusion. Obama looked up, his calm demeanor unshaken. Thank you, he replied. But I think it's important that we address this openly. Misunderstandings can happen, but the perception of unfairness, whether intentional or not, carries consequences. The cafe grew quieter as customers leaned in, eager to hear the exchange. Obama gestured to the seat across from him, inviting the manager to sit. Please, Obama said. Let's talk about how this happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. The manager hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the invitation. After a moment, he nodded and sat down. "We're a small business," the manager explained, his voice low. "Sometimes, when it gets busy, we have to prioritize regulars or large parties. I'm not saying that excuses what happened, but it's part of the challenge we face." Obama nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that running a business comes with its challenges," he said. "But prioritizing fairness and respect can go a long way in building trust with your customers. When exceptions are made for some and not for others, it sends a message, intended or not, that certain people are less valued." The manager shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I see your point," he admitted. "And I'll be honest, this isn't the first time we've received feedback like this. I just didn't realize how big of an issue it was until now." Obama stood, his presence commanding but approachable, and turned to address the staff. "I'd like to say something to your team, if that's all right," he said to the manager. The manager nodded, signaling for the baristas to gather near the counter. The patrons, sensing something significant was about to happen, remained silent, their eyes fixed on Obama. As someone who has spent a great deal of time working with people from all walks of life, I've learned that respect and fairness are cornerstones of any community, Obama began. "What happened today isn't just about me, it's about how we treat each other, especially in moments when we might be unaware of our own biases." The staff listened intently, some nodding in agreement. "We all make mistakes," Obama continued. "What matters is how we respond to them. If this cafe can become a place where everyone feels welcome, regardless of who they are or where they come from, then you'll have accomplished something truly special." The manager, visibly moved, stepped forward. "Thank you for your understanding and your words," he said. "I promise we'll take steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Starting today, we'll work on creating a more inclusive environment for everyone who walks through these doors." The patrons broke into quiet applause, the tension in the room finally dissipating. Rachel approached Obama as he returned to his seat. "That was incredible," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Obama smiled. "Sometimes, the best way to address a problem is to approach it with understanding," he said. "It's not about pointing fingers, it's about finding solutions." Rachel nodded. "You've given them something to think about. And honestly, I think you've inspired everyone in this room." Obama chuckled softly. "If that's true, then it's a good day." As the afternoon continued, the atmosphere in the cafe transformed. The staff seemed more attentive, engaging with customers warmly and openly. Several patrons approached Obama to thank him for how he handled the situation. "You set an example for all of us," one man said. "I just hope they follow through," another added. Obama responded with humility. "Change doesn't happen overnight, but conversations like these are a start." When Obama finished his coffee, he left the cafe with a quiet nod to the staff and a wave to the patrons. The moment wasn't about grand gestures or viral fame, it was about fostering a better understanding of how small actions could lead to bigger changes. The cafe manager, now reflective, stood at the door watching him leave. "We've got work to do," he said to Emily, who nodded solemnly. Barack Obama remained seated at his table, quietly sipping his coffee. The earlier tension in the cafe had begun to dissolve, replaced by an atmosphere of quiet reflection. The manager, still visibly shaken from their discussion, stood near the counter, speaking softly to his staff. Patrons whispered among themselves, marveling at how gracefully Obama had handled the situation. Rachel, still seated by the window, couldn't hide her admiration. "He didn't just diffuse the tension," she said to her companion. "He turned it into a teaching moment." As the cafe settled back into its rhythm, the staff seemed more attentive and aware. The baristas moved with a renewed sense of purpose, their interactions with customers noticeably warmer. Emily, the barista who had initially refused Obama service, hesitated before approaching his table. "Mr. Obama," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't handle things the way I should have." Obama looked up, his expression kind. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. Acknowledging where we fall short is the first step toward improvement. Emily nodded, visibly relieved. I appreciate your understanding, she said before retreating to the counter. Nearby, a middle-aged man who had been observing the situation decided to speak up. Approaching Obama, he extended his hand. I just want to thank you for how you handled that, he said. You didn't let it escalate, but you still made your point. Obama shook his hand. It's important to address issues with clarity and calm, he said. Sometimes, the way we respond can be as impactful as the issue itself. Another customer chimed in from her table. It's a lesson for all of us, she said. How many times have we seen something unfair and just stayed quiet? The room hummed with agreement, the earlier unease replaced by a sense of collective awareness. The manager, having spoken with his staff, returned to Obama's table. I want to thank you again for your patience and your feedback, he said, his tone sincere. Obama gestured for him to sit. It's never easy to face criticism, he said, but what matters is what you do with it. Your willingness to listen and adapt is what will make the difference. The manager nodded. We're already discussing how we can improve bias training, clearer policies, and better communication among the team. I want this place to be somewhere everyone feels welcome. Obama smiled. That's a good start, he said. But remember, change takes time. It's a process, not an event. As news of the incident spread, not through viral videos or hashtags, but through word of mouth, it sparked broader conversations in the local community. Regular patrons began sharing their thoughts with the cafe staff, offering suggestions and encouraging the changes the manager had promised. The cafe became a symbol of transformation, not because of the incident itself, but because of how it was addressed. Customers noticed the difference in the way they were greeted, the attentiveness of the staff, and the genuine effort to create an inclusive environment. Rachel, still seated near the window, couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. She turned to her companion. It's amazing how one person's actions can influence so many others, she said. Her companion nodded. He didn't just fix the problem, he left a blueprint for how to handle situations like this. Rachel smiled, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't expected when she walked into the cafe that afternoon. As Obama finished his coffee, he rose from his seat and approached the counter. Thank you for the coffee, he said to Emily, who managed a small but genuine smile in return. It was an honor to serve you, sir, she replied. Obama nodded, then turned to the manager. I wish you all the best moving forward, he said. Remember, every day is an opportunity to do better. The manager extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. Obama. We won't forget this. As Obama exited the cafe, the patrons collectively exhaled, as though releasing the final remnants of tension. For many of them, the day had been more than just an encounter with a public figure. It had been a lesson in humility, leadership, and the power of constructive dialogue. The cafe, once the setting for a tense and uncomfortable moment, was now a place where change had been set into motion. And for Obama, it was another reminder that even the smallest actions could create ripples far beyond the immediate moment. The incident at the cafe, while seemingly minor, had already begun to ripple outward. Barack Obama's calm and deliberate handling of the situation left a strong impression on everyone present. Patrons resumed their conversations, but the tone had shifted. What had started as a tense and awkward atmosphere had transformed into one of introspection and quiet respect. The manager, now visibly more at ease, approached the baristas huddled near the counter. We need to talk about what happened today, he said, his voice firm but not accusatory. Emily, the barista who had initially refused Obama service, looked down at her hands. I didn't mean to, she began, but the manager raised a hand to stop her. This isn't about assigning blame, he said. It's about understanding how we can do better. What happened here today isn't just about one moment, it's about how we make every customer feel. The baristas nodded, some exchanging glances of agreement. Obama observed the interaction from his seat. He could see the effort being made and felt a glimmer of hope that the lessons learned today might have a lasting impact. Meanwhile, customers who had witnessed the situation began to voice their thoughts. A woman approached the counter, addressing Emily directly. "I've been coming here for years," she said, "and I've always felt welcome. But today, I saw something that didn't sit right with me. You treated him differently, and it wasn't fair." Emily's cheeks flushed. "I understand," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." Another customer chimed in. "It's not easy to admit when you've made a mistake," he said. "But the important thing is to learn from it. We're all here because we believe this place can be better." As the conversations continued, Obama stood and addressed the room. "If I may," he began, his voice commanding but warm. The cafe grew silent as every eye turned toward him. "What happened here today is a reminder that we all carry biases, whether we're aware of them or not," he said. "But what defines us isn't whether we make mistakes, it's how we respond to them." He gestured toward the staff. "I've seen the willingness to learn and improve, and that's something to be proud of. Change doesn't happen overnight, but small steps lead to big progress." The patrons nodded in agreement, and a quiet applause broke out. The manager approached Obama once more. "We're committed to making this a better place for everyone," he said. "Starting today, we'll be implementing regular training sessions on inclusivity and customer service." Obama smiled. "That's a great start," he said. "But remember, policies are only as good as the people who uphold them. It's about creating a culture of respect, not just ticking boxes." The manager nodded, taking the advice to heart. As Rachel watched the scene unfold, she couldn't help but feel inspired. Turning to her companion, she said, "This isn't just about one cafe or one incident. It's about setting an example for how to handle difficult situations with grace." Her companion agreed. "It's not every day you see someone turn conflict into a learning experience." Rachel pulled out her phone, not to record, but to write a post. Her words captured the essence of the day. Barack Obama didn't just fix a problem, he taught us all a lesson in leadership and humanity. Over the following weeks, the cafe began implementing the changes promised by the manager. Staff attended workshops on bias and inclusivity, and the new policies were displayed prominently near the entrance. Our commitment to every customer, respect, fairness, and equality. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Regulars commented on the improved atmosphere, and the cafe became a symbol of growth and accountability in the community. Emily, in particular, took the lessons to heart. "That day changed the way I think," she said in an interview months later. "It's not just about serving coffee, it's about how you make people feel." For Obama, the incident was a small but meaningful reminder of the importance of everyday interactions. During a later speech, he referenced the experience. "Leadership isn't just about speeches or big decisions," he said. "It's about the small moments, how we treat each other in the ordinary course of life. That's where real change begins." His words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that progress often starts in the most unexpected places. News of the incident spread, but it wasn't through social media outrage or viral posts. Instead, it was word of mouth, the story of how Obama had calmly and gracefully handled a tense situation. Local newspapers picked up the story, highlighting not the initial refusal of service, but the way Obama's approach turned a negative moment into a lesson in humility and respect. "It's a reminder," one columnist wrote, "that leadership isn't just about grand speeches or major decisions. Sometimes, it's about how you handle the smallest interactions." Months later, the cafe implemented new training programs for its staff, focusing on inclusivity and customer service. The manager credited Obama for inspiring the changes. "His word stayed with us," he said in an interview. "He didn't just point out what we did wrong, he showed us how to be better." For Obama, the experience was another chapter in his lifelong mission to foster understanding and unity. "Every moment is an opportunity to lead," he said during a later speech. "It's up to us to decide what kind of leaders we want to be." The cafe incident became a small but powerful example of how even the simplest actions could create lasting impact, proving that leadership and grace could change not just moments, but minds and hearts. The incident at the cafe, while seemingly minor, became a powerful reminder of the importance of fairness and respect in everyday interactions. Barack Obama's calm and thoughtful response turned what could have been a divisive moment into a teachable one, inspiring change not just within the cafe but throughout the local community. The cafe staff embraced the opportunity to learn and grow, implementing new policies and training programs to ensure that every customer felt valued. For patrons who witnessed the incident, it was a moment of reflection on the biases we all carry and the responsibility we have to address them. For Obama, it was another chapter in his lifelong mission to promote understanding and unity. As he later said in a speech, true leadership is about how we treat each other in the small moments. It's about choosing to build bridges instead of walls. The cafe's transformation and the conversations it sparked proved that even small acts of accountability and compassion could lead to meaningful progress. It was a reminder that change often begins with ordinary people in ordinary places, taking extraordinary steps to make the world a little better.